Hello.
Hey, Stewart, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Well, thanks for doing this. Obviously, we were set up to talk about the new police reissue, release, archival title, whatever you want to call it. But how long was it in the works for?
Well, decades.
Right.
Actually, it was in the vault for decades. And it was, I guess, Andy Summers who kind of pulled it out and remembered that it exists, because it originally came out on Laserdisc, which was a technology that soon died.
Right.
And I think only 5 people ever saw it. And
Right.
so it's kind of been sitting there unseen in the vault, ready for this new release, which has been kind of jazzed up a little bit. We took all the parts and applied modern technology to make them more pristine.
Right. You have always been very forward thinking. And by that, I mean, not just ideologically, not just being prolific, not just your foray into the classical world, which you've been very successful with, but you don't seem like somebody who's looking back at the past. You're pushing the ball forward artistically in every way. So do projects like this drive you crazy, or are you just happy to solidify your legacy more?
They don't drive me crazy at all. I quite like them. We have had kind of a change of heart, partly because the Beatles movie, and also, a lot of my friends were 16 during my glory days. Bands, Tool, Rage Against the Machine, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fish, Primus, all the bands of that era. I've learned from these youngsters, and they've discovered that their fans don't need them to be pristine. We made our records to as perfect as we could possibly make them, and we don't want, or haven't wanted, people to see behind the curtain, and to have other versions that are lesser out there. And so that's sort of been our band ethos. So we've been very stingy with releasing stuff. But
right.
After seeing the Beatles film and realizing that as a fan of the Beatles are above me, it is the Beatles before whom I bow and scrape, and they are not even slightly. In fact, their stature is enhanced by being able to see the process, by learning, by seeing behind the curtains, by seeing the demos, by seeing the imperfect versions, by seeing the process. As a fan, I love all that stuff. I want to see more of that, not less. And in fact, we're having kind of a change of heart about all that stuff that we've been hiding and hoarding, with the view to maintaining the perfection, supposedly, of the original releases.
Right. You answered what I was going to go towards, which is that this was originally a Laserdisc, and the only other real thing that we got from the 90s from the Police was that very strange P. Diddy remix that Sting put on a best of compilation, and that was pretty much it. And then we saw the Best Buy box set, I think around 06, 07. We see this. Is there a lot more in the archives that, if all goes right in the world, we might see?
There is.
Got it. There is. So going back to a lot of the people that you mentioned with Tool and Primus that you inspired, in my opinion, there wouldn't be System of a Down without you, because of the polyrhythms and the
I'll tell Serge you said that.
Well, I mean, if you think about a song like Jet Pilot, that's totally a Stewart Copeland rhythmic exercise.
Oh, well, very, very kind of you to say so. Of course, I only see the differences. When people tell me, such and such a band sounds just like the Police, or such and such a drummer sounds just like you, I listen, I hear all the differences.
You hear all the differences. I guess that comes with being a worldly kind of guy. And as I mentioned before, classical, I think you're one of the first high profile people to find long-term success in the classical realm, because, McCartney did 1 or 2 things and it was kind of an in and out thing, but you've now been in it. Has it been about 20 years since your first composition?
Yeah, longer, actually. Longer. I think the difference is that I was forced by 20 years before the mass as a hired gun mercenary film composer.
Right.
I was forced to learn how to use orchestra. And it was an involuntary but thorough education. I now orchestrate myself, and I've done all these police orchestrations, the derangements, and I write opera, and that's what I do these days. That's now my day job. And so the others that you mentioned, Serge among them, they have done it kind of because it's really cool and interesting and fun and new and inspiring, but they're not as enveloped by it. They, it's kind of an experimentation where I'm full in. I had 20 years to learn how to do this stuff, and I'm doing it and will continue to do it because I'm just so much more immersed in it, I guess, than all the others.
Well, and then you have to consider back before the police, there was the Clark Kent stuff where you played all the instruments as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of a do-it-yourself kind of guy.
Right. And
which is why I learned how to do this orchestrations for myself, because I would be that, at first I would hire others to take my music and turn it into an orchestral score, and I'd show up on the date and I'm thinking, well, okay, that's sort of what I wrote, but God, it sure doesn't sound like John Williams or anybody, what's wrong here? How come it just goes da 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 instead of da 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 da, well, because you got to put these markings on the page, hairpins, tenutos, accents, articulations, there's all kinds of information. I call it the Italian that you put on the page so that they know not only what notes to play, but how to play them, which is critical. And gradually I just took it over more and more my goddamn self.
Yeah.
And now that's pretty much what I do.
But what blows my mind about that, and the compliments are intended, there's no but, there's no backhanded thing coming, is that there's all the success in the classical space. Yet you've also found success in the jam band world, not just with Oysterhead, but I remember you were one of the first people to do web-based jam sessions.
Ah, yes. Yes. The Sacred Grove, which is where I am right now. Those were just fun. My buddies come over here, and my studio is a giant train set. It's not a professional workplace at all, although I do work here every day. I don't have an engineer. I do it all myself. It's like, how to mic up this amp. Let's see that 57. I'm going to try that. It's a hobby. It's a train set. And how to work it, not only how to mic everything up, but also, the place where the guitarist sits. Yeah, there are plectrums right there. There's 9-volt batteries. I know what guitarists like. This room is just absolutely the ultimate. I guess the template is, we're playing Atlanta, and we're at the Four Seasons after the show, and I don't know, Foreigner comes in or some other band, and we're all there at the bar trading war stories and wishing we could go jam somewhere. That's what this room is. I'm not sure if Foreigner is the best example, but okay, Tool. we run into Tool at the bar and wish we could go and jam somewhere. That's what this room is, and it's a hang. And I eventually got more and more into it, and I've got cameras around the room, and I just turn them on with 6 hours of memory. They just go on, and I forget about it, and everything's mic'd up, so there's no technology. It's just a party, and they're not even aware that I'm recording. Really, I told them, but they soon forget. And then the next day I cut out these videos, and I discovered something interesting with not having a cameraman or an engineer in the room, is that with the stationary cameras, the camera hasn't moved. Danny Carey is banging on the drums over here, or Snoop Dogg or whoever, and then we do the playback, and now he's standing over there. I give him a trombone and take a solo, and he does an air trombone solo, and then I can MIDI in the notes that he would have played if he knew how to find them. And it's just a hobby, a fun exercise, and they're all there on YouTube for all the children to enjoy.
So the fact that you do that, which is the peak of creativity and forward-thinking uses of technology, and then you go with the classical world, which is more structured. And
oh yeah. Well, for instance, this weekend I'm playing with Oysterhead,
Right.
For 2 hours when you get up there on stage, just three of us, and make shit up because that's how they like it. And then the following week, I'm in Minneapolis with Vocal Essence, who are doing my oratorio, Satan's Fall, for giant choir and an orchestra. You know, it's about Satan and what the fuck is his problem, is what this oratorio is about. And so, yes, those two worlds are very different.
Maybe the only classical composer I can think of who has worked on a Ben-Hur production and a satanic thing as well.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. You know, it is interesting. For some reason, I seem to be drawn to these, you know, this summer, my opera, The Witch's Seed, opens in Italy with some songs contributed by Chrissy Hind. And that's got a religious aspect too. I mean, I'm not religious myself, but I'm kind of fascinated by religion.
I can imagine. And three quick questions, and then I'm going to let you go. And the first one is that I had the pleasure of interviewing your brother Miles about his book last year. I'm curious.
Run for cover.
With two successful brothers in the same industry, do you
actually three? My brother Ian was equally successful in the same industry. He was an agent. He had a roster way more impressive than Miles or me.
You cut me off mid-sentence there. I was curious if you actually read his book or you go, you know what, I lived it. He managed us. I don't need to see it again.
I did read it. And since we've kind of fallen out, Miles and I was very, very, very charmed that he didn't carve me up too bad. He paints me as a little bit of a prince, but that's okay. From his point of view, I was a prince. He did look after me. I was his kid brother, and he did look after me. And I had many advantages in life by virtue of having him as a big brother. But yeah, and also his side of a lot of the stories, I knew all the people in there, but kind of how he met Ed Bicknell or whoever he's talking about, or Jay Boberg. It was kind of interesting to fill in some of the gaps.
Yeah, you two are both dynamic storytellers, so that's a family trait. I'm taking.
Actually, my brother Ian's book is the best book of all. It's called Wild Thing. He was the agent. FBI was his agency. And from everybody from, Talking Heads, B-52s, Joan Jett, Beatles, Go-Go, his roster was everybody. Miles managed some acts and he had some on his record label, but the agent had like 3 pages of roster of bands that Ian was agent for. And he created, along with Miles, Ian created the circuit which enabled Miles to sell the records. Ian created the circuit of clubs that all these English bands could play across the land so that they could break in America, these English bands. And that was all created by Ian. And his book actually is the best read. Miles and I both went to college and got fancy educations. Ian went to Vietnam.
Right.
And yet, as a man of letters, his book is the best.
And one of those clubs is here in my town, Malibu, which is in Long Beach or Lido Beach, Long Island, New York. Was that your first gig or second gig with the Police at Stateside?
The first gig was CBGB's. I think second was Grendel's Lair in Philadelphia.
Oh, because the Paradise
up to Boston to the Rat Club.
Boston always takes credit for being the first Police show, but now we've cleared it up.
No, CBGB's in New York City.
There you go.
Sting and Andy arrived that day. They arrived at Kennedy Airport. I was, as an American citizen, I was already here, but they got held up by visas. And they arrived. We picked them up at the airport. Miles and I picked them up at the airport and drove them right down to the Bowery and put their suitcases in the dressing room, which is actually just the bathroom. Went out and played our first show in America.
Wow. Documented history.
They didn't even have a sound check. They just plugged it into amps they had never seen before. At least I had my own drums, which we all carried over as hand baggage. But the amps were just random guitar amp, random bass amp.
Wow. Next question or topic. Do you have a TV recommendation that you could pass along for someone who needs a new show or series to start?
Well, right now, my favorite show is Severance. Although that's the serious choice, but really Pam and Tommy kicks ass. That's who I want to be when I grow up.
It does. And you, like Tommy Lee, are just one of those generational drummers. I kind of say the Mount Rushmore, or rather the three-headed Mount Rushmore, is you, Travis Barker, Tommy Lee for this current generation of musicians.
Really? But I'm not even the same generation as those two guys.
No, I mean the people who are coming up on rock bands today.
Yeah.
It's you three right there. And the last question that I have, and this comes from nowhere, but I'm slowly writing a book about David Lee Roth, and he was a huge fan of the Police. I'm curious if you ever had run-ins with him over the years.
Not really. There was one, I think it was the first MTV Awards, the first one they did, where I think he was there, and I've always had a very high opinion of him. I thought his attitude was just so rock and roll. The rest of us are all just trying to pretend to be rock stars. He was the real deal, and you gotta love him. Not entirely sane, not entirely rational, but just that's, you know, when it comes to being a rock star, and Tommy Lee as well, by the way, that's how you do it.
Yeah, when I say that he's a big fan, I remember when Dave had his K-Rock radio show, one of the first songs he played during his show was Next to You by the Police. And if that doesn't show a big fan, I don't know what does.
Ah, bless his heart.
But, you know, thank you for the many years of great music. Hope there are more releases coming from you in the form of the Police, Oysterhead, Sacred Grove, whatever it is. Keep up the greatness there, Stewart.
Well, thanks a lot.
Paltrocast.